The title of this presentation is The Impact on Indians of the Criminal Ban on Basic Foods in Guyana. The main argument is, it is my contention that the food ban was evil and racist. It violated basic human dignity and the right or freedom of a people to consume whatever goods they want and to engage in cultural and religious freedom. The methodology of this paper surrounds three critical questions. What kinds of food items were banned, and why were they prohibited or became criminalized if found in possession? And why were they prohibited or became criminalized in possession? What were the immediate effects of the ban on Indians? The types of foods one would consume affect health, but there is no data on how food, the types and the quantities affect physical, physiological, psychological, mental, and emotional health. No data exists to gauge the effect of the food ban or on the food ban, as well as the ban on other types of goods. No substantive academic study was ever conducted on this subject. There were some newspaper commentaries or letters in Guyana's newspapers, but there is no substantive socioeconomic or psychological or political study on the food ban or on the ban on any non-food items in Guyana, like religious goods, for example. So this is a virgin territory. The information and data is very scarce on the effects of the food ban. All information here is gathered from conversations, talks, and experiences as lived in Guyana. So in a way, this is a seminal study. The paper is original in that no such study was previously undertaken. Now, introduction. The basic foods and other essential items tied to the diet and religious and cultural practices of Indian descendants of Girmits were either criminally banned or unavailable in Guyana between 1970 and 1988. The ban and scarcity of basic goods led to severe hardships in the Indian community, as they found it very difficult to maintain their nutritional health, in addition to retaining cultural and religious diet and practices. The phrase criminally banned is used because the foods or items were not only banned, that is prohibited from importation into Guyana, but if caught in possession with them, the consequences included arrest, physical and mental abuse, indictment, prosecution, and heavy fines. Many Indians were known to be imprisoned, physically beaten and tortured, mentally abused, and fined huge amounts of money. It is not known how many people were arrested for being in possession of banned goods, referred to in Guyana as contraband items. In every village I traveled in Guyana during this period of time, and subsequently, Guyana is largely segregated by race, I heard of Indians being arrested for contraband trafficking or caught consuming prohibited goods like potatoes, condensed and evaporated milk, onions, flour items, and so forth. I used a title of Evil of the Bread and Roti Ban initially for the presentation of paper, but I'm focusing on the consequences of the consequences and effects of the ban. Now, roti, I use the term roti, but not only roti, but other products was also banned. Roti was a basic part of the Indian diet. Indians are a roti consume people. One can say it is in their DNA. They were born into it. They were cultured into it. They ate it daily. It was served for breakfast. Indians were not cultured into bread in rural areas. They depended on roti. Workers took roti to the job for breakfast and lunch. Some even had it for dinner. They experienced extreme difficulty without roti. There was something sinister about the policy of banning flour that is used to make roti. Now, people around the world would find it hard to believe, unfathomable, unbelievable, that a country, a government would ban the consumption of roti. For me, it is outright evil in that no part of the globe would any government consider legislating, much less implementing a ban on the consumption of a basic food staple like bread or roti or any other product made from flour, like cake, pastries. Yet it happened in Guyana. Not even the evil Idi Amin, a hater of Indians, prohibited Indians from consuming the cultural foods or outlawed the importation of flour. The apartheid regime in South Africa did not ban food items that prevented Indians or any groups access to flour or the cultural diet or religious items. Tanzania, Malawi, Ghana, Kenya, and other countries in Africa, even in Fiji, Trinidad, Malaysia, none of these governments, known to be very friendly to Indians, banned the consumption of certain food items. They did not legislate consumption. Indians, while victims of racial discriminations in the Caribbean, did not ban consumption of certain food items, not even in North Korea, Cuba, the Soviet Union, behind the Iron Curtain, yet in Guyana. So why was there the food ban in Guyana? It is my contention that it was done as a deliberate policy of creolization of the Indian community, deculturalization, dehumanization. Indians are not consumers of beef and pork, depending on your religious background. Indians don't eat, Hindus don't eat beef, and Muslims don't eat pork. So onion, garlic, potatoes, flour, channa, dhall are very, very critical for the cultural and physiological upliftment of Indians. Yet these products were banned in Guyana. Now, surely other groups would have been affected by the ban on these items, but which group suffered the most? It is my contention that Indians were affected the most, because there is no replacement for roti flour products for the community, for the Indian community. But Africans, Portuguese, Chinese, mixed, and the native indigenous Amerindian people could find replacement. They could eat other products. They have no dietary restrictions on beef and pork and so forth. Similarly, for religious practices, agarbatie, ghee, cloves, guggle, camphor, and other paraphernalia are critical for worshiping of Hindus and Muslims and even Christian Indians who use a lot of these products because of the influence of Hinduism on their cultural practices. They had difficulty with the religious worshiping, but the Portuguese, the mixed, and other Christian groups had no problem with worshiping without these items. So how did Indians make out in Guyana? The banned goods were smuggling from neighboring countries, in particular Suriname and Venezuela. Initially, it was Suriname, later Venezuela, through cross-border underground trade. Indian settlements predominate on the border with Suriname and Venezuela, so it was not surprising that Indians dominated the illegal border trade with Venezuela and Suriname. Banned goods were also smuggling from Trinidad and overseas territories through clandestine means, shipping goods in barrels and so forth. Now, banned goods were not allowed through the airports. Although custom officers tend to close their eyes to banned goods, the suffering of the population increased over time. The custom officer would be bought with a bribe or given banned items like apples, grapes, chocolates, flour, potatoes, etc. Now, banned goods led to a flourishing underground market. Now, but over a period of time, businesses were raided. And the ban was strictly enforced. Violation of the ban, if caught by the newly established food police, led to long imprisonment and hefty fines, including confiscation of goods and properties. Women who were arrested or their husbands arrested or any male relative were forced into trading sexual favors to avoid criminal indictment or to get shortened prison sentences. Only Indians were targeted. There was no known reported case of a non-Indian being arrested or caught for smuggling or trading or selling banned goods. Those who traded in gunboats had to pay bribes or to get the police to close their homes. The police often raided homes and stores in search of goods, including families celebrating festivals like Diwali, Holi, or having a puja or a kata, or a wedding or a Quran Sharif or a Christian religious service. Mandirs and masjids that serve mahanbog and sirni and meals were also not spared. When the food police raid homes, hosts moved with speed to rid the place of roti and other flour products during their festivals. Police would cart off food from these festivals to their families. And if lucky, one would be spared with an arrest. It was very embarrassing for hosts when police visited their homes in search of banned goods. But after a while, Indians grew accustomed to contraband food raids by the police. Some of the confiscated goods were kept as evidence for prosecution, others were dumped. I recall seeing bread floating in the rivers or in the trenches in the markets whenever I visited Guyana. The health and nutrition of Indians were seriously affected by the food ban. It led to stunted growth and other serious effects such as diabetes, overweight or even underweight, protruding bellies, stroke, heart disease, kidney problems, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, hypertension, high cholesterol, cancer, gout, among others. The effect of the ban in Guyana was not much different from, say, what happened in other countries that experienced food shortages, like as in Cambodia, or the Sahel of Africa, or Haiti. The food ban in Guyana led to an increase in hunger, starvation, crime, and migration. Now, the food items were banned under the guise of shortage of foreign exchange. But even when merchants had their own foreign currencies, they were not allowed to import banned goods. Guyanese visiting from abroad were not allowed to send or to bring contraband goods in Guyana. Although there was supposedly a shortage of foreign exchange to purchase imports, the dictator Forbes Burnham chartered an aircraft to Melbourne, Australia for the Commonwealth heads of government sometime in the 70s. 48 of his supporters went on that safari trip. Now, during the time of the ban trip, Burnham also created paramilitary organizations, packing them with his supporters so there could be no shortage of money. Few Indians were recruited in these security forces or in the government. One of the arms of the ruling party, the Women Revolutionary Socialist Movement, headed by the ruler's wife, went on outreaches promoting consumption of local food and baking with rice and cassava flour, while denigrating imports as imperialist foods. Several of them were caught at a police checkpoint bringing back wheat flour to the capital city of Georgetown from an outing on the Quarantine Coast on the border with Suriname, where black marketing flourished. The racist government provided justification of the food ban under various guises and names to hide its true intent, calling it revolutionary, socialist, Ujamaism, an African Swahili word for socialism, and under self-sufficiency, grow your own food, eat local, anti-imperialism. But the government contended that its policy was meant to reduce the imperialist food underpopulation, and that the banned items were associated with the so-called imperialist countries. But these justifications were all propagandistic to win support of its base. The intent was to control all aspects of life of the Indian community. The government took over trade and so forth. All trade had to be done through government-controlled agencies. Over 80% of the economy fell under control of the government. Prior to the ban, over 80% of the economy fell in the hands of the private sector. Post-banning, over 80% of the economy fell in the hands of the government, in effect on the hands of the ruling party at the time. Now, to sum up, the worst effect of the food ban were on children, especially infants who could not have regular access to milk. The government stressed mothers nursing, but the mother lacked a proper diet to produce milk for her baby. Poor nutrition hinders not only adults, but children as well. This led to tremendous damages on brain development, which negatively affect the child's ability to learn and thus educate himself. Poverty that arose out of bad government also affected people. Now, some of the probable effects of the ban were mental health issues, growth deformation, weak knees, dental and bone issues, negative impact on the body mass, the negative impact on body organs, hair growth, family problems, and a rise in suicide. Diabetes and stroke also increased during this period of time. The combination of marginalization, discrimination, food ban, violence, and destruction of property of Indians must have led to a deep psychological and mental illness that ultimately led to suicide. It is my conclusion that the ban on food and religious items was deliberate, a government policy seen as an act of cultural genocide to force the migration of Indians from Guyana for political reasons. Over a period of time, it did reduce the number of Indians in Guyana and weaken their voting power. The policy was a success in that Indians have become increasingly creolized. They have adapted African culture, and they're now reduced to a minority, as hundreds of thousands of Guyanese emigrated from Guyana during the 1970s, 80s, and through this period. Indians have been reduced from a majority population of about 55% during the 1970s through the mid-1980s to less than 40% today, while the Creole, African, and mixed population now make up over 50% of the population. I should add that the ban on foods is also a violation of one's human rights. It is a violation of the UN Charter as well as UNESCO. Thank you for this period of time, allowing me this period of time to make my presentation. Thanks.